Hi, my name is Jumana, not Philip, as you rightly said. This is a very spontaneous talk. I'm here in place of someone who wasn't able to be here, but I'm very delighted to actually take part in this. I'd like to start with you just looking at this blank page and dreaming, just for a few seconds, to close your eyes or keep your eyes open and think of something that's as close as possible to a dream or an idea or a vision that you might think of. Just take 10 seconds to do that. And then I'd like you to actually think of your dream in a way that's decomposed. What are the elements of your dream? Where do you dream? Where are the people that are in your dream? Does it include a space? Does it include time? Does it include people? What does it include? It's probably a difficult exercise to do in a lecture room, but just keep it in mind as I go through the slides. Where I'm assuming the majority here are architects or designers. If you're an architect, can you raise your hand? Okay. So I'm a trained architect. I worked in architecture for about 7 years, and now doing something a bit off from the typical practice of architecture. What you're going to see at the beginning is a personal journey that then goes back to Fabric, the organization I'm invited to speak on behalf of today. As an architect, from 2000 to 2007, I worked in Beirut on multiple projects with multiple architects. And architecture is about starting with a dream, with a vision of something that's very far ahead, something that sometimes takes 10 years, 5 years, or even 15 years sometimes to be executed. So one of the first really exciting projects that I worked on was in 2004, 2005. It took about a year to get to the shop drawings, to get investors to invest in, and so on. And then at the time we got our first investor, a few days later, 14th of February happens, Hariri gets killed. So the project surely gets shelved, the investors fade, and we're on to a different project. That's a year of work. And then we work on another project in Sin El Fil, in a warehouse, turning the warehouse into a creative space. Again, a project we worked on for 1 year. That was with the two partners, Hassan Al-Assad and Nadim Khattar, along with multiple creative companies in Lebanon. The idea was to bring all of these companies together to work in one space and have a public space, a community space in that warehouse, to bring sort of an incubator of some sort. The day we were about to sign the contract with the contractor was the 12th of July, 2006. So again, another project was shelved. So as an architect, you start wondering, what is it that one can do that's not very far-fetched? That's something that actually accepts that we're in a region that's very unstable. And instability happens even in stable countries, so it's not unique to us. This is the warehouse we were working on. Now it's very dynamic, and the whole area has actually changed quite a bit with the cultural spaces. Going back to the dream as architects as well, and developers and thinkers in the city, this is in Dubai. In 2007, for 2 years, there was work on a project that took up 7 plots of land, 230,000 square meters, and brought together about 10 different consulting groups, quite a massive amount of money, and was in the process of being cooked in-house, completely secretively, in the walls of a company called The Edge. And then, so that's the site in Business Bay. the architect, RCR, Spanish architecture company, the client, Vladimir, landscape architect in Lebanon, Hani Asfour, and many others that you may know. So this project took up 2 years, extremely exciting work, a lot of collaborative work, traveled to different places to see architectural masterpieces. And then 2009 comes, January, we're fired, basically laid off at the sort of height of the crisis and economic crisis, global economic crisis that surely affected Dubai. So again, as an architect, you think, I'm working and I'm just hiding all of the work that I'm working on, and I'm meant to be working for people, with people, and to actually not waste that valuable energy that brings people together. I'm sure that many people in this room actually have similar experiences. So I was really inspired by a team of 2 people who have a company called Beka Films, and who document architecture in the making or architecture post-construction, so its usability. But in this particular project, that's a church by Richard Meyer in Rome. And this is an image taken from the website of Richard Meyer. Very puristic, seems like it's in the middle of nature, but actually it's not. So the reality of it, it's within a context, very much embedded in a social context, in a community. What Beka Films did is that they actually went and interviewed people during the process of construction, asking them how they envisioned the church to actually change their environment, and what it meant to them to be living next to a construction site. So I bring this and I go in reverse, because the whole concept of construction is something we don't speak about enough in architecture. We look at the object, we idolize it, we put it on a pedestal, and we speak about it as an object very removed of its, not only of its context, but also of the time factor that brings us there. So either it's a time factor that actually, whereby there's a high risk of losing the project, where this entirely disappears, and so everything that made it happen or made the vision actually exist just dies and falls off, or there's an opportunity there. And the opportunity is what's really interesting, and what I learned from my work with Fabric, which I'll show in a bit. So this is the church during construction, and this to me is much more inspiring than the building itself. What happens during construction, and especially on this site where it's very open. In a few years back, as a group, we're a group of 3 architects, 3 designers and architects, Reem Sharif, Muhammad Hafza, and myself, working with different groups on projects that have to do with social practices in public spaces. And my particular involvement has been in projects that we did in refugee camps, where it's a very dense urban physical environment, but where there's a lot of inspiration working with children. I'm starting with the project at this point, but this is actually 90% into the process of the work we did with the children. I'm starting here because this is what we know as architecture, and it's what we identify with, and there is a space that's being constructed, but this is also during construction, and the children were actually beginning to use it while it was under construction. This is in Talbiya, one of the smallest refugee camps in Jordan, near Amman, close to the airport. And then you get this. A few months later, after the construction was completed, after the children had actually used it, we go to the site, and this is what we see. Luckily, we saw this instead of actually showing that the space was completely erased. So because this gives hope. It says we're pausing the project. There is a problem we have to address, but we're just gating it temporarily to see what we'll do with it. But this to us is obviously a shock. It's just like the crisis before that in Dubai, and just like the 2006 and 2005 big uncontrollable events. So So we come to this, and this is a down point for an architect, I believe, when you see that your work is actually not used. Then you go back and think of the process again, and how actually here the children had already inhabited it before it was live. So I'll take you a few steps even further into how this came about. The architecture itself is not what we're after. It's more, how do you think of something and construct it based on a process that involves the community. So we worked with about 12 children in Talbiya camp, ages 7 to 12, for them to actually document their play habits. We're through working with children in Burj Al Barajni, actually on a project that's completely different from this one that was about dreams and breaking down dreams into the present. We realized that their play habits are actually extremely innovative, and it's very important to capture that and actually make them realize that they have a creativity, and that creativity can actually become transferable knowledge to other children, maybe even in different contexts. So these are some of their explorations into their own games, identifying elements of their games. So here, the cloth that you just seen is put together and starts composing a space, and then from it they do collages and three-dimensional objects that become informative to the architecture. So the space that we finally designed was actually made up of, unfortunately it's pixelized here, but made up of different elements of their play habits. So some of it is about climbing, shadow, different aspects that were brought into one architectural element. Those were the renderings of that space that you saw. And when you look back at the image of the caged object, it doesn't matter anymore because that's an instance in time that hopefully will change. But if you look back, it's not wasted. Children were involved. They did produce at each stage. There was a final outcome, as opposed to, let's say, the Dubai project, where for 2 years everything was hidden, and even today all I have is a rendering. So how can you bring out the process from something that's idealistic, saying we're all working towards this, to actually incremental insertions that even if the final product just completely vanishes, there is proof of life and communication and interaction that has happened before that is not limited to the people who work on the project, but also very much involves the community. I'll just take you through some of the process that we go through in Fabric, where this was a project about dreaming. So again, a couple of children were asked what their dream was, and surely there's the teacher, there's the doctor, there's the hostess, or just a random dream. But then how do you make it so that the child can actually bring it and appropriate it into the present? So we start mapping and asking, what's your dream? What's the color of your dream? Who's in your dream? And to give tangible aspects of the dream that can be brought into the present, where the child then starts drawing their dream, storytelling, and eventually builds an installation that is very much about the present and turns that very far-fetched thing into an interactive, basically contribution to the community where they're living, and the realization and understanding of that space through their own propositions. This is a very strong project where the child actually started, in the first workshop, started with the idea of dreaming to be a teacher. And then through investigation and through drawing, he realized that actually the most exciting part for him about being a teacher is the secret of the teacher's bag. So he developed a teacher's bag as a costume that unfolds into a costume that he can wear that is filled with water bubbles. And then the next stage was for him to actually take that item that he'd developed and to push it further into the community. And it started becoming an exploration about water in the camp. So he went to different locations to actually identify the sources of water. And then turned it into an artistic project where he would collect the water from the different sources, label them, and make temporary drawings out of them on the field in the camp. This is a group of children who each had a very different dream that brought it together into making a resting community center or community space for the workers in the camp. This is all in Burj Al Barajne. And I think that's the last. No, it's stuck. This is also the children observing what's around them, and there's a lot of sort of thrown around objects, and especially chairs in the camp. So they brought them together and made this play space that they temporarily put together in the camp. And all of this could lead to an architectural permanent intervention. But regardless of whether it does or it doesn't, the fact is that this moment captures something that is very real and that is in and of itself, and does not necessarily need to rely on what's coming after it. That's all. So.